Security scan. Please stand by. Scanning. Do not move. Security scan successful. You now have full access to all files. Welcome to Conspiracies, Inc. With your host, Bryan Batillo. Do you believe?
I am Bryan Batillo. This is Conspiracies, Inc. And thank you for joining us for our very first season as we kick off our alien season, our alien cover-up, our alien controversy, our alien conspiracy season. Thank you for joining us again. And I am joined today by Kathleen Marden, who is the niece of Betty and Barney Hill, which is probably my most favorite abduction case of all time that I've researched. Abduction case from 1961, interracial couple coming from Canada to New Hampshire, coming back from vacation, had a sighting. So I'm really excited to have Kathleen here today. And Kathleen, could you just tell us a little bit more about what you've done outside of being the wonderful niece of Betty, Barney, and Hill? What I know you have so many credentials and I don't want to get them wrong, so I'm going to let you take over and toot your own horn.
Okay. Well, I graduated from the University of New Hampshire, and I did graduate work at the University of Cincinnati and the University of New Hampshire and a couple of other small colleges, taking classes while I was teaching. I taught school for 14 years. I was an education services coordinator. And 30 years ago, I decided to put it all aside and to become a UFO investigator, archival researcher. I decided to investigate my aunt and uncle's case and the archives, and interview my aunt and everyone who was still living, who was a researcher or an investigator on the case. And that culminated in my first book, Captured the Betty and Barney Hill UFO Experience, with Stanton T. Friedman, nuclear physicist. And then we went on to write 2 additional books. Then Denise Stoner and I wrote the Alien Abductions files together. It begins with her case, which I investigated extensively. And then from there, I wrote Extraterrestrial Contact, What to Do When You've Been Abducted. I've just completed my 6th book, but I also updated Captured, the 60th anniversary of that. So I am an author, a researcher, an investigator. I am a hypnotist certified in forensic hypnosis, regression, and a quantum healing hypnosis practitioner. I've worked on 3 major research projects on about 5,000 experiencers, and on 2 of those projects, there were PhD scientists working with me on those. So I think I have a pretty good grasp on this field. I've been doing it a long time.
You fit in perfectly with the legends we've had so far on the show. So you're overqualified like everyone is. So thank you. Thank you for being here. I do want to jump in right away and just start out with a couple things regarding the actual abduction in 1961. Now, I know that Betty and Barney Hill were coming back from a vacation from Canada. They were coming back to New Hampshire where they were living, and they saw a light in the sky, and this light followed them quite a bit. And Barney showed a lot of curiosity and got out of the car and started with his binoculars, correct? And he started observing the UFO and noticing that the UFO seemed to be noticing them. And then I guess Betty at that time was a bit overtaken and didn't want him to continue. So they went down the road further where they were more aggressively pursued by the UFO. And then ultimately lost about 2 or 3 hours and about 35 miles from their house. And when they got home, they just didn't know how they got there. And they knew that something probably had happened, but they weren't sure. Is that correct?
No, it's not.
Okay.
If you read my book, you'll find the original documented evidence in there from the Air Force, from the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena. And the real story is what you said until the part where the UFO followed them more aggressively. And what happened is it surged ahead and descended. It stopped. It had stopped rotating by now. It descended to 200 feet above their car.
Okay.
This is when Barney had to stop the car in the middle of the road. He got out of the car, opened the door, left the car running. He had binoculars in hand. And this craft descended even lower at this point. And he stepped away from the car to get a better look at the craft. And when he did, it moved to an adjacent field, and he crossed the road and with his binoculars stood at the edge of the field looking up at this craft. And it continued to descend in his direction.
Okay.
He could see, and this is in the original reports, he saw figures dressed in black shiny uniforms that were somehow not human. That's a quote. He became terrified over what he saw, especially as it was descending toward him and sort of rocking back and forth, and something started to drop down out of the bottom of the craft. He pulled the binoculars from his eyes so violently that he broke the binocular strap, a leather strap.
Wow.
And went running to the car, screaming to Betty that they had to get out of there or they were going to be captured. Thus the name of my book.
Right.
And so he said to Betty, roll down the window and look up. When I was getting into the car, I saw them moving in our direction. She did that, but she didn't see anything. She expected to see lights from the craft or the sky. She didn't see lights. She didn't see the sky. She rolled the window up. All she saw was blackness. And within moments that they heard a series of code-like buzzing sounds striking the trunk of their vehicle, caused the car to vibrate and for some sort of an electrical tingling sensation to pass through their bodies. In fact, Betty felt of the metal on the car to see if it was electricity.
Wow.
And that is when they lost their conscious recall of a lot of what had happened from then until they were 35 miles down the road. 35 miles down the road, they heard a second series of these buzzing sounds. Barney stopped the car again, and he and Betty had a little conversation. She said, Barney, now do you believe in flying saucers? And he said, oh, Betty, don't be ridiculous. And I can prove I can make that sound. And so they didn't see the craft this time, but he drove the car from one side of the road to the other. He did everything he could to try to reproduce that sound, and he couldn't.
No.
But they did have conscious recall of finding themselves on a dirt road somewhere. There were tall trees all around, and they saw a fiery orb that seemed to be sitting on the ground. At first, they thought it might be the full moon, but then when they talked to astronomer Walter Webb, who was the first investigator for NICAP,
right,
he said, no, the moon had already set at that point. It couldn't have been the moon. So they, after that, went looking for that place, for that road. And, but they didn't remember precisely how they got there, how they turned off. And that was brought out through hypnosis later, and the capture was. But all of the earlier events were in their conscious memory and recorded in the Air Force files and in NICAP's files.
Okay, now I also heard that they had damage to their vehicle, some kind of electromagnetic paint. The electromagnetic energy may have peeled the paint off the car. That was
It didn't peel it, no. There are so many stories about this, and some of them are intentional lies.
Was there evidence
there was
on
spots.
the car?
Yes,
Right,
there
okay.
were shiny spots on the trunk of the car, in the precise location where they heard the buzzing sound striking the trunk. They had not been there the day before, but when Betty and Barney arrived home, they were there.
Okay.
Betty called my mother.
Uh-huh.
My mother called a neighbor who was a physicist,
Yes.
and he said to Betty, if you have a compass, take it out to the car and see how the compass needle reacts.
Got it.
She did. This is when she found those shiny spots, and it caused the compass needle to whirl, indicating a magnetic field.
Now, is it true that your mother told Betty that she had a UFO experience 4 years before that?
Yes,
That's true. I got something
that
right.
is true.
Yes, I
Yes,
got
she
something right.
did have one. She and another aunt
Okay.
had gone grocery shopping. They went every Friday night.
Right.
This Friday night, they were returning home, and there was a huge, like, mothership, cigar-shaped ship hovering over a field. There were smaller disc-shaped craft flying around it, and they stopped the car. They went to a neighbor's house, and the people who lived in that house went out and saw it as well.
Kathleen, is this in the same area around Indian Head or wherever? Is this New Hampshire where your mom
It is
lives?
New Hampshire. Betty and Barney lived on the seacoast in Portsmouth.
Okay.
We lived 20 miles away, slightly inland, not directly on the coast, in a little town called Kingston.
Okay.
And it was in South Kingston near the Plasto line where my mother and another aunt saw that craft.
Which really, it pays a lot of heedance to the fact that my first 2 episodes of this podcast is Me Under Hypnosis by Yvonne Smith. And Yvonne Smith actually has a theory that it tends to follow genetic lines or family members. Abduction cases or sightings tend to follow family lineages. Do you notice anything like that through your research?
Well, it's not just a theory for me. It's been confirmed in those 3 studies,
right,
that I worked on with about 5,000 experiencers. And absolutely, yes.
because with me and my mother too, my mother and I have been correlated with my abduction and her multiple sightings and her multiple visitations. But getting back to when Betty called the Air Force after she realized that she had had nightmares for a while and she was she called the Air Force immediately. And then did they deny an aircraft in the area? And then later, to the Freedom of Information Act, they found out that it was verified sighting? No, so they admitted it?
Let me tell you what the Air Force report says.
Okay.
When Betty and Barney made their report with Pease Air Force Base, that ended up being a Project Blue Book report sent to Dayton, Ohio. The Air Force officer, Major Henderson, told Betty and Barney that they had an incident, a radar incident in Newington, which is right next to Portsmouth, the previous evening.
Okay.
And there was also a sighting. They didn't find out then. I didn't find out until I was doing research on my book, that there was another radar sighting earlier that evening in North Concord, Vermont, a radar station there, which was only 17 miles from Lincoln, where Betty and Barney had the close encounter. So in the Air Force report, yes, they did have something on radar, but then they stated that they had never observed a solid object or a solid aircraft.
Okay.
Now, there's been some contention over that. And in my book, you'll read what 2 officers from Maxwell Air Force Base, where the files are all kept now, stated about that case when they were doing a research project for their master's degree. The project was entitled, Should the U.S. Air Force Reopen Project Blue Book?
So when did Betty and Barney go under hypnosis by Dr. Benjamin Simon? When did that occur, and what did that lead to after? And I know it brought to light a lot of the things that happened during the abduction, like the physical tests that were done to Betty and Barney, the needle through the navel, maybe to extract eggs, the extraction of sperm from Barney. And I'm so enthralled by the fact that these aliens gave Betty such access to other areas of the ship, and they were willing to share things with her that you just don't see in a normal abduction case. Didn't they describe where they were from? Didn't they show her a star map of some kind that showed them frequently traveled routes or less frequently traveled routes? And wasn't there a scientist who verified Betty's recollection of the coordinates of Zeta Reptilius? Is there any of that that is true?
Well, let me tell you the precise facts.
Okay, please. That's why you're here. Thank God.
Well, Betty and Barney always remembered vaguely a roadblock, encountering a roadblock on that dirt road. They also had physical evidence when they arrived home.
Right.
And so there's been scientific analyses of the evidence. It's all in the book. But Barney ended up developing bleeding ulcers, high blood pressure. He was in really bad shape because this troubled him so badly.
Oh, yeah.
He was just terrified of it. And so he was referred to Dr. Benjamin Simon,
Okay.
who had a great deal of success during World War II, working with veterans who were returning from the war, who had physiological problems that were psychogenically induced, just as Barney's were. So Betty and Barney were seen separately for 6 months in Boston, Massachusetts by Dr. Benjamin Simon. This is this renowned neuropsychiatrist.
Who taught Yvonne Smith everything she knows, who put me under. Because she was bragging about him being her everything, and she owes everything to him. But go ahead. Sorry,
I do too. I do too, because I have all the hypnosis tapes, and it has really helped me in my own practice.
So you have the hypnosis tapes from your aunt and Barney.
Yes,
that is amazing. Because my mom told me a story. My mom used to be a reporter for the National Enquirer, and she had a friend named Bob Pratt, who was the UFOologist there, and they were really good friends. And he played the tape for her, and she came home changed. And that's, I think, what sparked her interest. And then it sparked my interest, because I would see, the communion book on the table with the alien face. And I would say, I've seen that face before. My mom was freaked out by that, but it's interesting that she said the shocking reality to her was when Betty said, "My knees don't bend that way. Please don't bend my knees that way." To me, it gave such humanity to it that it was that something that had happened, or is that something that didn't happen? You gave me a look there.
I gave you a look because that didn't happen.
Okay.
No,
well, it's from my mom, so it might be a little
right.
A stretched version.
So let me go to Betty and Barney were taken on to the craft. She fought for her life. That's the way that she tore her dress, and they were taken to separate examining rooms.
Okay.
And so in Betty's examination was first. There was only one physician on the craft, and they took the skin samples and examined her joints, her limbs, but they didn't bend them the wrong way. That's not on the hypnosis tapes.
Okay.
But they were very interested in her.
Well, was there more than one? Was there more than one session later in her life as she got older when Barney passed? Was Betty still going?
Dr. James Harder
Okay.
Dr. James Harder
Okay, that could be it.
hypnotized her too. Yes,
Okay.
yeah, but it wasn't Dr. Simon.
Got
So
it.
anyway, they're in separate examining rooms. What they did to Betty that hurt was the examiner produced a large needle
Okay.
that was connected to a tube. And she said, "What are you going to do with that?" And he said, "Oh, we're just going to put it insert it into your navel. It won't hurt, don't worry." And she said, "It will hurt, don't do it." And he did it anyway, causing her excruciation pain.
Was
And
this
so the one that she
telepathically?
called the leader.
Was this
Yes.
telepathically they were communicating? Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Communication was telepathic.
Okay.
Now she had a series of dreams that people confuse. And in the series of dreams, they spoke to her in English with an accent, but that's not what happened under hypnosis. So anyway.
Do you feel they were extracting an egg at that point?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes, I certainly do.
Okay.
And so the leader, she called him, I always call that one the escort, because the experiencer has a long-term relationship with that one entity and feels comfortable in that entity's presence, just as Betty did. And he took her pain away. Then Betty put her dress back on. The examiner had torn the zipper, broken the zipper when he tried to unzip her dress. He didn't know how to do it. She had to unzip it for him after he broke it. And then he went into Barney's room, and Betty's dressed now, and she's beginning to trust the leader. And so she says to him, "I know you're not from around here. Where's your home port?"
Okay.
And so he produced a 3-dimensional kind of model of a star map. And it had stars of various sizes and colors. Some of those stars were connected by solid lines, some by dotted lines. And he made her understand that the solid lines were trade routes, whereas the dotted lines were expeditions. And so he said to her, "Do you know where you are on this map?" And she said, "No, I don't know very much about the universe." She wasn't even thinking of the galaxy.
Right.
And, so he said, "If you don't know where you are, how can I tell you where I am?"
He's
and
right.
he took it and he put it back into the wall that he took it out of. And then under hypnosis, Dr. Simon, as Betty relived this, said to her, "Well, if you think that you can draw this accurately and it doesn't trouble you too much, go home and over the next couple of weeks, see if you can draw it and bring it back to the office for me."
Okay.
And so she did. She was able to draw it. She had a remarkable memory. And
very intelligent, very analytical and intelligent and logical.
Yes, she and Barney both were. And so she drew this, and it was published in The Interrupted Journey, which was the first book, and it focused only on the hypnosis.
Okay.
And so in that was the star map, but Marjorie Fish, who was a brilliant woman from Ohio. In fact, she was an amateur astronomer, a teacher at the time, but after she did this work, she went to work for the Oak Ridge Nuclear Laboratory as a research assistant.
Wow.
So she was very brilliant, and she spent several years building models of our local galactic neighborhood, 54 light years out from our sun. She had to go to the university and sit there and copy all of the distance data and the star characteristics out of the catalogs.
Wow.
And still, after building all of these models, she had 14 in all, and in all directions, she still did not find a match. which was very disappointing for her. But then in 1971, she went back to the university when she heard that a new star catalog had been published.
Okay.
And it had new distance data because we had progressed and developed better technology
Yeah.
that would get a better measurement. And so she copied down all of the new information. She took it home. She put some new stars into the map that hadn't been there the first time. The measurements were better. They were further than 54 light years out the first time, we thought.
Right.
And finally, adjusting everything, she had a match for Betty's map. But then who was going to vet her work for accuracy? This is when Stanton Friedman, nuclear physicist, was called in and asked to meet with Marjorie. And if he found her to be intelligent and that her work to be well done, he would find scientists to vet her work. He told me that he felt that Marjorie was more comfortable speaking with scientists than with members of the general public. And she was brilliant. She had a very well thought out methodology. She was precise in her work. And so she and Stanton took that model to Alan Hynek at Northwestern University, Dr. Alan Hynek, who had been the former director, the astronomical consultant to Project Blue Book.
Right.
And he was the head of the Dearborn Astronomical Observatory and department chair.
Right.
And so he did his work on it, he vetted it and discovered that it was accurate. And then it went to statistician David Saunders, who was on the Condon Committee, scientific study on UFOs. He was the lead investigator who ended up getting fired over finding the Turk memo. And but anyway, as a statistician, he looked at it, he statistically, and he said that this was remarkable. The chances of this happening just by chance were anywhere from like 10,000 to 1 million.
Right.
And then Ohio State University astronomy department had computers, and they did a computer generated model of Betty's map, and they said that it was accurate. So all of that, and the stars on Betty's map have special properties that made scientists so interested in this and believed that Betty actually had been abducted, because all of the stars on Betty's map are sun-like stars, although only 5% of the stars in our local galactic neighborhood are sun-like.
Wow.
And all of the sun-like stars in that volume of space are on Betty's map. She didn't miss any of them.
That is
and they're in a plane, like pepperoni on a pizza, rather than like raisins spread out in a thick loaf of raisin bread. And what that means is that it's logical and easier to travel from nearest star to nearest star.
Yes.
In fact, one of the astronomers who looked at it said that if we lived on a planet on Zeta Reticuli, which was the probable star that the planet where the entities came from.
Okay.
If we lived there and we were exploring a local galactic neighborhood, that is the precise route that we would take.
How can that all line up and there be any question about the validity of the abduction and the validity of UFOs and the validity of life on other planets? I mean, that to me says it all. Like, if you're not curious after that, what are you doing?
Well, that's because there were disinformants who were telling the public that you could throw marbles into a sandbox and you'd be able to find a constellation of stars somewhere that would match it. They didn't mention any of the special characteristics or the scientific work.
or the odds of her being right by chance just don't exist.
Right.
So why are we even trying to even weigh out the fact, is there life on other planets? I think that maybe, do you feel that there's a hybridization project going on by these grays? Are there other alien races involved in the same type of experiments with us? Or is it maybe just exclusive to this one alien race in this one region that seems to be kind of crop picking from us, taking our seeds and taking our ability to reproduce with them almost?
Well, they say that they do this for our benefit and theirs as well.
But they also
because-
said the needle wouldn't hurt, and she knew the needle would hurt.
Oh,
So you
I
can't.
know,
you
I
can't
know
get
that
with this
that
stuff.
was not a good thing that happened, unfortunately. But that's what they say, and we know from them that they lost the ability to reproduce.
Okay.
That and so they've been just reproducing differently in test tubes and that sort of thing. They need our genetic material for that. They lost their emotions, and so they want their emotions back too. So that's the way we benefit them. And it's not just the grays, the insectoids do this as well, working with grays.
So you're
And
talking about maybe praying mantis type
praying
beings.
mantis types, yes.
Okay. And they are, would you say that the mantis and the grays are on the same level of authority and technology, or is one more superior than the other?
A lot of people think that when the grays and the mantis types are working together, the mantis is in charge.
Right. Okay.
And that's, that's what I sort of learned when in hypnosis sessions too, that there is a mantis that appears to be in charge, but a gray that appears to be in charge as well, but in a different capacity.
I noticed that
oftentimes, okay, go ahead.
No, go. Oftentimes, you were saying?
Oh, yes, and oftentimes they have separate jobs, such as the mantis being the examiner, the one who will insert the implant or remove the ova, that sort of thing. And then the gray, sort of taller gray, about 5 to 5.5 feet tall, who always has a relationship with the human, might communicate with the human, educate the human, take the human on a tour of the craft, that sort of thing.
Now, where do you feel other races like Nordics come in? Do you think, or Palladians, who tend to be a little more human looking but not human? Or do you have any opinions about the Nordics or the Palladians? The Palladians tend to be more of a teaching contactee type alien, and the Greys tend to be more of a abducting type alien.
Well, there are different races of Greys too.
Okay.
And some of them are an abducting type, and some of them are benevolent. In terms of the Nordic types, I'm aware of Nordic types who are highly benevolent. I just say Nordic type, there are many different types who look human as well.
Well, these Nordics tend to have the white lab coats. Some are in these wigs, some aren't. They usually travel in pairs, looking identical to each other. My mother's had a lot of interaction in the last 15 years with what she says are these Nordics. But only because I told her, I said, does it look like this? And she said, yeah. So I don't know. What do you feel? Does each individual alien race kind of take what they want from us? Or at some point, are we going to get some guidance and some levity to elevate us as a whole?
Well, let me tell you, dating back to 1954, an Navy admiral and a leading person in the Canadian government worked together, communicating through a woman who could communicate with these non-human entities who said they were in gigantic motherships not far from our planet out in space, and that they were here to educate us. They're here for our benefit. They are in charge of this quadrant of our galaxy.
Okay.
And they went to our political officials around the world. They said, we will give you one piece of hardware, but you have to work together on this world in order to produce what it is we're going to give you.
Got it.
And of course, where nationalism is the name of the game, the governments didn't want to work together. So here we are today. And I have done a 2-year study with a man who communicates with these non-human entities. I have had contact with some of them. They're a council of entities. 2 of them are tall human types.
Is this a galactic federation?
They belong to the Galactic Federation.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow. So the Galactic Federation is a real thing.
Yes.
It's amazing.
It is. And
amazing.
I saw evidence. They gave all of us on this scientific team investigating this, they gave us evidence that they were real. We felt their presence, a very strong tingling sensation in our bodies. They showed us orbs. They showed craft.
Just got a tingle. When you said that, I got a tingle. I see orbs all the time. And in fact, sometimes when I'm taping and recording, I'll go back. There are 2 episodes of this podcast I've seen orbs on. So that, I mean, so you're saying that these advanced beings that are almost guides for us have, like, is it similar to the energy we have when we pass on? Is this becoming dimensional at this point?
They live in the 5th dimension.
Okay.
Yeah, there are 2 who are 9th dimensionals who no longer are in the physical, who are sort of in charge. But the others are just entities from other planets, and they are in charge of this quadrant of the galaxy, as I said. There's an avian, a tall white, a mantis type, who is quite a jolly fellow. I really like him. He has a kind of a grin, a line, looks almost like a cartoon character type of smile.
So you're telling me there's a mantis being that smiles?
Yes.
That's amazing. Now I'm not as frightened by them. If they could just smile, I'd feel better.
Yes. Then there is a tall gray. There is a gray who's about 4.5 to 5 feet tall. He's a scientist.
And they're on other planes of reality, or they're in another dimension?
They live in different dimensions, which they explained only means that their vibrational frequency is faster than ours. We're denser. The way I explain it is, if you put an ice cube into a pan, say, and you melt it, we are the water in the pan. And then it boils and it steams. And so you can see these entities coming in and out sometimes like shadow beings.
Okay.
But then the water is in the air, but you can't see it. And that's what we have. We cannot see them. I can't see them when they come into my environment, but they cause a very strong tingling in my body, and they can speak with me telepathically.
And
I don't see them very often, but I have a lot of tingling.
Is this in a dream state for you, or are you fully conscious at this time?
I'm fully conscious.
Okay. And are you able to respond telepathically as well?
I can respond if I relax.
Got it.
I can't respond in the state that I'm in right now. But if I were just to, I give myself rapid hypnosis,
okay,
then I can communicate.
Wow. And what are the winning lotto numbers? No, just kidding. What have you gotten that has made you feel is the most rewarding message from that type of entity? What hope do you have for us? Is there any hope for us to get it together, or are we just going down in flames? What is the outcome going to be?
Of course, they have great concern over our use of nuclear weapons and our failure to be good stewards to our environment. They said that we have reached this point in our development one time and we destroyed ourselves, and they're not going to let it happen this time.
Wow.
They will intervene even though they don't want to. They want us to go on the way that we are. They don't want to disrupt our lives. I hope they don't have to, actually. I hope that they can assist us to reach a higher spiritual level. What they explained to me is, and to many others too, according to my studies, is that we are out of sync. Our technological development is out of sync with our spiritual progress or growth. And when this happens, it can lead to great destruction on a planet. And so they're here to attempt to raise human spirituality. Now, part of that is through a genetic program with fetuses born to a human mother and a human father and raised on this planet, but they have special qualities, sort of like indigo children.
Star children.
Star children, yes.
Wow.
Yes. And so...
And they have that sprinkle of something else that makes them different and makes them more compatible as a human to other humans, more peaceful, less confrontational.
Yes, highly intelligent and telepathic. Many of them are empaths. Most experiencers are as well, where you can actually, it's a psychic sense of the other person. You can feel their emotions as if they're your own. You might be able to sense the health of the human body.
Wow.
That sort of thing. Some of them are healers. So it's quite remarkable.
So maybe as they get integrated into our society and plugged into key positions, then over time things will benefit us more. And that's our hope, is the future of our children being better, different than we are.
That is the great
or enhanced.
Hope, that we will move ahead on an evolutionary scale. So we will enter into a spirit of cooperation rather than being at war, as we have been apparently since our beginning.
Right. Kathleen, you have been such an amazing guest. Unfortunately, I have to stop after 45 minutes because I don't know how to download anything larger than that, and I don't want to lose the gold I have with you. But you've been so enlightening and so amazing on so many different levels. I didn't anticipate, but how refreshing you've been and how educated and smart and so much more than Betty and Barney Hill's niece. I can't tell you. Not that that wouldn't be enough, but I want to thank you very much for sharing your experience and your knowledge with us, because I think this is stuff that people really needed to hear. They needed to get it right from a good source.
And all of those messages are going to be in my new book as soon as it's released.
Well, and what's that? When is that going to be released? Is there a title?
I hope within a month or two.
Okay.
Forbidden Knowledge. And it's about my personal experiences and all of the messages from the ETs.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you again, Kathleen. I really appreciate everything you've done for us. You're amazing, and I can't wait to have you again in some capacity down the road, because I'm going to get into dimensional stuff at some point too. So maybe
Okay.
I'll have you back, and I promise I'll read up on all your stuff.
Thank you. And it was my pleasure being with you.
Thank you again.
You take care.
All right, you too. Find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you find your podcasts. And all of our social media accounts are on Linktree. If there's anyone you'd like us to book or any questions you'd like answered, go to our website at conspiraciesinc.podcast.com.